Hello and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the age of exploration. The time between the 15th and the 17th century was called as the age of exploration, as well as the age of the seafarers, where the seafarers or ships used to sail from the European countries and started exploring more about the globe and also made several colonies all around the globe. This was also called as the age of discovery, and the people of Europe wanted to gain more knowledge, as well as the main aim of these explorations was to get better access to gold and silver and to become more wealthy, as well as to find out new trade routes which can obtain them spices and silk, because silk and spice trade routes were dominated at that time by India and China. So the European countries wanted to find out new trade routes so that they could easily trade with the Asian countries. So the European countries, they started collecting funds so that they could send their ships in open oceans and explore more lands, as well as they elaborated and developed the system of mapping. Mapping became very important and modern in those times. Marco Polo was the inspiration behind all these navigations and explorations. Though he was not the first traveler to have traveled from Europe to Asia, but he used to document all his travels and used to write an account of wherever he used to travel. Marco Polo was a Venetian merchant. He used to travel, he was an explorer and writer. Venetian means he belonged to Venice, which is in Italy. Marco Polo had visited Asian countries via the Silk Route. He reached China and also had documented his travels in China. The exploration was from the year 1271 to 1295. His book called Livre des Merveilles du Monde, sorry if I'm wrongly pronouncing it, it means travels of Marco Polo had inspired several European travelers. He had traveled in China as well as presented a detailed account of his travels, which had influenced the European cartographers to make maps of the world and also to travel across the Cape of Good Hope, which is in Africa, across towards the Indian Ocean. Christopher Columbus was a well-known Italian explorer and navigator. He wanted to reach to India and Asia and find a new route from around the oceans in search of spices. Along the eastern side of Europe, which was the direct spice route from Europe to India, the Arabs had captured it, and there was a lot of upheaval, wars, crusades. Therefore, it was absolutely impossible for European traders to travel from Europe to Asia and India. Christopher Columbus set on for sail on his ship called Santa Maria on the 3rd of August 1492. His voyages were Spanish based, that means he was sponsored by the Spanish monarchs, Queen Elizabeth I and King Ferdinand II. He reached the Bahamas in 1492 and he reached those islands which are now called as Cuba and Hispaniola and started colonizing these regions which are now in Haiti. 1493 he went again back to Europe and told his stories about his voyages. In 1493 again he started with his next voyage and reached Antilles. Then in 1498 he reached Trinidad and Central America in 1502. He named the people, the indigenous people who stayed in those islands, as Indians because their features resembled Indians. From there, the name American Indians began. This was the exploration of the New World. And thereafter, the Europeans started colonizing these islands and extracting the natural resources which were present in these islands, especially in South America. Another significant exploration was of Vasco da Gama, who was a Portuguese explorer. So Vasco da Gama was the first European to have reached India by way of the sea route. So instead of taking the normal route from the Mediterranean Sea, Vasco da Gama took the longer route from the Atlantic Ocean across the Cape of Good Hope, which is at the south of Africa, and moved towards the Indian Ocean. This was the longest distance which Europeans had travelled across the oceans. Vasco da Gama reached Calicut, which is in Kerala, on the 20th of May 1498, thus obtaining a lot of spices from India, especially cinnamon as well as pepper. This boosted the economy of the country. Portuguese started having a commercial monopoly over the Indian market, started trading a lot with India, and this gave an advantage for them to prepare and make and establish colonial empire in India. In 1524, Vasco da Gama was appointed as the governor of India and was given the title of a viceroy. From that time, Portuguese had a monopoly over the Indian trade as well as market. From there, it gave and opened new trade routes for other European countries like the Dutch, the English, the French also came towards India and established their colonies in India. There were several other explorations during this period, like Jacques Cartier's expedition. Jacques Cartier was a maritime explorer of France. He was a French explorer and mariner, and he was the first to find out the Gulf of St. Lawrence and found the country of Canada. In fact, he had found two major cities, which were Satacona, which is now Quebec, and Montreal, which was called at that time as Hochelaga. Another important explorer who was called as Ferdinand Magellan was an explorer from Portugal, and later on he started exploring from Spain. He had discovered for the first time the Strait of Magellan. A strait is basically a narrow piece of water which connects two ocean bodies. So Strait of Magellan was named after Ferdinand Magellan, which is the southern point of South America, which connects two ocean bodies, Pacific Ocean and Atlantic Ocean. Ferdinand Magellan had his explorations between August 1519 to September 1522. He was the first navigator to have circumnavigated the globe. That is, he went all around the globe. He even prepared a new map of the world. John Cabot, who was an Italian navigator and explorer, he had also discovered Newfoundland and made it possible for Americas to trade with Europe and vice versa. So in 1497 he had discovered Newfoundland.